Hansol Kim sat at the back of the floating classroom, watching his alien classmates through tired eyes. 3 weeks at Valthari Prime Academy, and he still felt like a zoo animal on display. The other students would stare when they thought he wasn't looking, then quickly turn away when he caught them. The classroom itself was beautiful. Made of some clear material that sparkled in the light of 3 suns, it hung suspended between the Academy's biodomes. Energy bridges connected each floating section, creating a web of learning spaces that stretched across the sky. Hansol had to admit it was impressive, even if the chairs were too small for human comfort. Today we will discuss proper handling of domesticated specimens, Professor Quindal announced. The tall, blue-skinned educator moved with fluid grace, his 4 arms gesturing as he spoke. Remember, gentle beings, all creatures respond to kindness and proper technique. Hansol shifted in his seat. The chair made a small cracking sound under his weight. Several alien students turned to look, their various eyes wide with concern. He tried to smile reassuringly, but that only seemed to worry them more. Mirza, the crystalline Zeltharian who sat near the front, raised one delicate hand. Her body caught the light like a living diamond, throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. Professor, what about the specimens from dangerous worlds? Surely they require different methods? An excellent question, Professor Quindal replied, his primary eyes focusing on her while his secondary eyes continued to scan the class. However, you must remember that truly dangerous creatures are never kept as specimens. Civilized species only study safe, manageable life forms. Hansol couldn't help himself. What about animals that seem safe but can become dangerous when scared or protecting their young? The classroom went silent. Every alien head turned toward him, and Hansol immediately regretted speaking up. Professor Quindal's expression became carefully neutral, the way all the teachers looked when the human students asked questions. Mr. Kim, the professor said slowly, I understand that your world has conditioned you to expect violence from all life forms. However, here we study creatures that have been properly domesticated. Violence is not a concern when dealing with civilized specimens. Veltar, the gas-formed Netherian, made a sound like wind chimes laughing. His silvery, shifting body pulsed with amusement. The Deathworlder thinks everything wants to fight, he said to his neighbors, just loud enough for Hansol to hear. No wonder their kind never developed true civilization. Hansol's roommate, Tae-Young Park, shot him a warning look from across the room. Tae-Young had been at the academy for a full semester and had learned to keep quiet during these moments. He understood the unspoken rule. Humans were guests here, and guests should not make their hosts uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Professor, Hansol said quietly. I was just thinking about safety protocols. Of course, Professor Quindal replied, though his tone suggested the topic was closed. Now, as I was saying, proper specimen handling requires patience and understanding. These virtues, I'm pleased to say, come naturally to evolved species. The lecture continued, but Hansol found it hard to focus. He looked around at his classmates, trying to understand how they saw the world. Mirza's people had evolved on a world of crystal caves with no predators. Her biggest evolutionary challenge had been learning to grow in harmony with the mineral structures around her. The Netherians like Veltar came from gas giant moons, where competition meant finding the best energy currents, not fighting for survival. Even the more robust species in the class had never faced real danger. Their worlds were old, stable, peaceful. Their ancestors had developed intelligence not to survive, but to create art, philosophy, and complex social structures. Violence was so foreign to them that they couldn't even imagine it serving a useful purpose. During the break, Mirza approached Hansol's desk. Her crystalline feet made tiny ringing sounds as she walked, like distant bells. "I hope Veltar's comments didn't upset you," she said. Her voice like music played through crystal. "He means no real harm. He simply doesn't understand." "It's okay," Hansol replied, though he appreciated her kindness. "I know I'm different." "Different, yes," Mirza agreed, tilting her diamond-like head. "But not in a bad way. I've been reading about Earth, you know. Your species accomplished remarkable things, creating art and music while facing constant danger, building civilizations despite living on such a harsh world. It's actually quite admirable." Hansol felt a warmth in his chest. It was the first time anyone at the Academy had called humanity admirable. "Thank you. That means a lot. I have a question, though," Mirza continued, her rainbow eyes curious. "Is it true that humans eat other creatures? Live ones?" "Well, not live," Hansol said carefully. "We cook our food first. But yes, we eat meat." Mirza shuddered, her crystal body chiming softly. "How do you bear it? The thought of consuming another being's life force?" Hansol tried to think of a way to explain it that wouldn't horrify her further. "It's different when you grow up with it, and we honor the animals that feed us. My grandmother always said we should be grateful for their sacrifice." "Sacrifice." Mirza repeated the word like she was tasting something strange. "Such a violent concept, yet you speak of it with reverence." Before Hansol could respond, Professor Quindal called the class back to order. As Mirza returned to her seat, she gave Hansol a small smile that made her face sparkle like starlight. The rest of the lecture focused on upcoming field studies. Professor Quindal explained that next week they would visit the Academy's biocontainment facility to observe some of the more interesting specimens in the collection. "You'll see creatures from across the galaxy," the professor said with obvious pride, "including some Calthran Venom beasts, though naturally they'll be properly sedated and contained. These magnificent creatures are quite dangerous in their natural state, but perfectly safe for academic observation when handled correctly." Hansol felt a familiar knot form in his stomach. He'd heard descriptions of venom beasts before: acidic saliva, paralytic venom, crushing strength. The kind of predator that Earth's evolutionary history had taught humans to fear and respect. "The containment systems are state-of-the-art," Professor Quindal continued. "Multiple barriers, sedation fields, and backup power systems ensure complete safety for all observers." As the class ended and students began floating and walking toward the exits, Hansol gathered his notes slowly. He found himself thinking about backup power systems and sedation fields, wondering if they were really as foolproof as the professor claimed. Tae-young waited for him by the door. "You're doing that thing again," his roommate said as they walked toward the energy bridge. "What thing?" "That thing where you think too much about what could go wrong. It's a very human thing to do." Hansol sighed. "Maybe, but being prepared for problems isn't always bad." "True," Tae-young agreed. "But try not to worry the other students. They're still getting used to having Deathworlders in their classes." As they crossed the energy bridge toward their dormitory, Hansol looked back at the biocontainment facility in the distance. Something about tomorrow's field trip bothered him, though he couldn't put his finger on exactly what. It was probably nothing, just his human paranoia acting up again. Still, as he watched the sun set over the peaceful academy, Han Solo couldn't shake the feeling that all this safety and security was more fragile than anyone realized. The biocontainment facility was even more impressive than Han Solo had expected. The massive dome stretched high above them, filled with carefully controlled ecosystems that housed dangerous specimens from across the galaxy. Artificial weather. Systems created different climate zones, while energy barriers separated predators from prey and visitors from everything else. Dr. Nayan Cho met their group at the entrance. She was a small woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, wearing the standard researcher uniform with several additional safety devices clipped to her belt. Han Solo felt relieved to see another human face, especially one that belonged to someone, clearly in charge. "Welcome to our facility," Dr. Cho said in accented Galactic Standard, though Han Solo noticed she spoke Korean to him and Tae Young when the other students weren't listening. "Today you'll observe some of our most fascinating specimens. Please stay close to the group and follow all safety instructions." Behind her stood Bo-Ram Lee, a third-year human student who worked part-time at the facility. She waved at the new arrivals, her confident smile putting some of the nervous alien students at ease. Her work uniform was more practical than fashionable, with reinforced fabric and multiple pockets for tools. "The Calthran Venom beasts are housed in Section 7, Dr. Cho explained as they walked through the facility's main corridor. "They're magnificent creatures, standing nearly 3 meters tall with natural armor plating and highly developed hunting instincts. Their acidic saliva can dissolve most known materials, and their venom causes immediate paralysis in 90% of known species." Professor Quindahl nodded approvingly. "And they're completely safe to observe?" "Absolutely," Dr. Cho replied. "We maintain them in a constant sedated state using harmonic frequency generators. The containment barriers are rated for 10 times. Their maximum strength output, and we have triple redundancy on all safety systems." Han Solo walked near the back of the group, listening to the conversation while observing the facility's layout. Emergency exits were clearly marked, though he noticed they seemed designed for orderly evacuation rather than rapid escape. The lighting was soft and calming, typical of environments designed for species that had never needed to flee from predators. Mirsa floated beside him, her crystalline form reflecting the facility's ambient light. "Are you nervous about seeing the beasts?" she asked quietly. "A little," Han Solo admitted. "You?" "Terrified," she said with a musical laugh. "But it's an exciting kind of fear. I've never seen a real predator before." Veltar, drifting nearby in his silvery gas form, made that wind chime sound again. "The Deathworlders are nervous about seeing caged animals. How amusing. I thought your kind lived with monsters daily." "Living with dangerous animals is exactly why we're careful around them," Tae Young replied calmly. "Experience teaches respect." They entered Section 7 through a series of airlocks and decontamination chambers. The space beyond was enormous, with multiple observation platforms overlooking different containment areas. In the center of the largest enclosure, Han Solo saw his first Calthran Venom beast. The creature was even more intimidating than the descriptions had suggested. Its dark, armored hide gleamed under the facility lights, and its 6 limbs ended in claws that looked capable of tearing through metal. Even sedated, it radiated a sense of barely contained violence that made Han Solo's instincts scream warnings. "The Alien students gasped and chattered excitedly, but Han Sol found himself studying the containment systems instead. The energy barriers hummed with power, and he could see the harmonic generators mounted around the enclosure. Everything looked sophisticated and well-maintained, but something bothered him. "Dr. Cho," he said, raising his hand like he was still, in elementary school. "What happens if the sedation system fails?" The doctor paused in her explanation of the beast's feeding habits. "The system is designed with multiple redundancies. Failure is extremely unlikely. But if it did fail?" Dr. Cho exchanged a look with Professor Quindal. "The barriers would still contain the creature until emergency protocols could be activated. The system is quite safe." Han Sol nodded, but he noticed she hadn't actually answered his question. He looked at the barriers again, trying to estimate their strength. They were certainly impressive, but the beast beyond them was built like a living siege engine. If it really wanted out, Boram appeared at his elbow. "Stop thinking so hard," she whispered in Korean. "You're making the professor nervous." "Those barriers," Han Sol replied in the same language. "They're designed to hold a sedated animal. What if it wakes up angry?" "The sedation system won't fail," Boram said, but she glanced at the barriers with new uncertainty. "The Academy has been running this facility for over 50 years without incident." A small chime sounded from somewhere in the facility's control. Systems. Dr. Cho paused, listening to her earpiece. "Minor power fluctuation," she announced to the group. "Nothing to worry about. The backup systems have compensated automatically." Han Sol felt that familiar knot in his stomach tighten. "How often do you get power fluctuations?" "Occasionally," Dr. Cho said with a slight frown. "The facility draws significant power for the climate control and containment systems. Small variations are normal." But Han Sol noticed that Sithar, the insectoid maintenance worker who had been checking equipment nearby, looked more concerned than Dr. Cho's casual tone suggested. The alien's compound eyes kept darting between his diagnostic tablet and the power distribution panels. Mirza had moved closer to the barrier, fascinated by the sleeping beast. Her natural electromagnetic field, a byproduct of her crystalline biology, was causing some interference with her biosuit's proximity sensors. Small warning lights flickered on her chest display, but she was too captivated by the creature to notice. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Such perfect predatory design. Every part of it evolved for hunting." Veltar swirled closer in his gas form. "Beautiful and completely helpless. See how civilization tames even the most savage beasts?" "It's not tamed," Han Sol said quietly. "It's just sleeping." "Same thing," Veltar replied dismissively. Han Sol opened his mouth to explain the difference, then closed it again. These beings had never faced a real predator. They couldn't understand that sedation and domestication were completely different things. To them, any creature that wasn't currently attacking must be safe. Another chime sounded, slightly longer this time. Dr. Cho's expression became more focused as she listened to her earpiece. "We're experiencing some minor system instabilities," she announced. "Nothing dangerous, but we may need to cut the tour slightly short." Professor Quindal looked concerned. "Should we evacuate?" "Not necessary," Dr. Cho assured him. "The containment systems are operating normally. We're just experiencing some power regulation issues." But Han Sol could see the maintenance workers' agitation increasing. Zithar was now moving quickly between different control panels, his many arms working frantically on his diagnostic equipment. Whatever was happening with the power systems, it was more serious than Dr. Cho was letting on. "Boram," Han Sol said quietly, "what exactly powers the sedation?"
"System?"
"Primary facility power with backup generators," she replied. "Why? And if both fail?" "There's emergency battery backup for essential systems." But Boram was looking at the control panels now, too, noticing the same warning lights that had caught Han Sol's attention. The Venom beast shifted slightly in its sleep, a movement so small that most of the alien students didn't notice. But Han Sol saw it, and he saw how the creature's claws reflexively extended when it moved. Even unconscious, it was a weapon waiting to wake up. Mirza was still standing too close to the barrier, her malfunctioning sensors failing to warn her about the minimum safe distance. The other students were clustered together, chattering excitedly about the magnificent creature and completely oblivious to the subtle signs of system stress throughout the facility. A third chime sounded, longer and more insistent than the previous ones. This time, even the alien students noticed something was wrong. The facility's lights flickered briefly, and several warning displays activated around the observation area. "Perhaps we should return to the main facility," Professor Quindal suggested, his forearms moving nervously. "Of course," Dr. Cho agreed, but Han Sol could hear the tension in her voice. "Everyone please move calmly toward the exit." As the group began to move, Han Sol took one last look at the sleeping Venom beast. Its breathing had changed, becoming slightly faster and more irregular. The sedation was starting to wear off. He caught Boram's eye and saw his own concern reflected there. They both understood what the alien students and faculty didn't. They weren't just observing a contained predator. They were standing next to a barely restrained force of nature, held in check by technology that was beginning to fail. The beast's eyes opened briefly, revealing intelligence and hunger in equal measure, before closing again. But in that moment of eye contact, Han Sol felt like he was looking at death itself. The tour was about to become much more educational than anyone had planned. The power fluctuation hit like a wave through the facility's systems. Han Sol felt it in his bones before the lights dimmed and the warning alarms started their soft, polite chiming. Emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in a pale blue glow that made the alien students look even more otherworldly than usual. "Remain calm," Dr. Cho announced, though her voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before. "We're experiencing a temporary power redistribution. All safety systems remain operational." But Han Sol could see Jithar frantically working at his control panel, his compound eyes reflecting the warning lights as error messages cascaded across his screen. The insectoid's mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sound that meant extreme stress in his species. "Dr. Cho," Jithar called out in his buzzing voice, "the harmonic generators are operating at 60% efficiency. The sedation field is weakening." A hush fell over the group. Even the alien students, with their limited understanding of predator behavior, could grasp what that meant. Professor Quindal's primary eyes went wide, while his secondary eyes darted toward the emergency exits. "How long before full system restoration?" Dr. Cho asked, moving toward the control station. "Unknown," Jithar replied, his clicking growing more agitated. "The backup power is struggling to compensate. We may need to initiate emergency protocols." In the containment area, the Venom beast stirred again. This time the movement was more pronounced, its massive head lifting slightly before settling back down. The creature's breathing had definitely changed, becoming deeper and more regular as consciousness slowly returned. Mirza was still standing near the barrier, mesmerized by the awakening predator. Her crystalline form caught the emergency lighting and scattered it in rainbow patterns across the walls. "It's waking up," she whispered, her musical voice filled with wonder rather than fear. "Mirza, step back from the barrier," Boram called out, but the Zeltharian seemed frozen in place, watching the beast with scientific fascination. Veltar, meanwhile, had begun to expand in his panic, his gas form spreading outward in an instinctive response to danger. Unfortunately, his expanding form was blocking one of the main exit routes, though he seemed unaware of the problem. "Everyone needs to move toward the exits in an orderly fashion," Professor Quindal announced, his forearms gesturing toward the corridors. "This is simply a precautionary measure." But orderly was not what happened. The alien students, raised on worlds where danger was theoretical, had no experience with real emergency situations. Some froze in place, others clustered together for comfort, and a few began moving in random directions. Their evolution had not prepared them for fight-or-flight responses. Tae-young moved to Han Sol's side. "This is about to get very bad, isn't it?" he said quietly in Korean. "Yeah," Han Sol replied, his eyes fixed on the slowly awakening beast. "These systems weren't designed for a fully conscious predator." "Should we try to help with the evacuation?" Han Sol looked at the chaos developing around them. Veltar's expanded form was now completely blocking the main exit, while several other students had somehow managed to get themselves wedged together in a secondary corridor. The emergency procedures, designed for calm and rational beings, were falling apart under the pressure of actual fear. Another power surge hit the facility, stronger than before. This time the lights went out completely for several seconds before the emergency systems kicked in. In the darkness, Han Sol heard a sound that made his blood run cold. The Venom beast was fully awake and testing the barriers with its claws. When the lights returned, the creature was standing upright in its enclosure, its intelligent eyes surveying the observation area with predatory interest. Acidic saliva dripped from its jaws, sizzling where it hit the floor. The beast had grown even more massive when standing, its armored bulk filling the containment space. "The primary barrier is holding," Zithar reported, but his voice had risen to a high buzz. "But the harmonic field has failed completely. The creature is fully conscious." Dr. Cho was speaking rapidly into her communicator, trying to coordinate emergency response teams. "We need immediate power restoration to Section 7. Initiate containment protocol Delta 7. The Venom beast moved to the barrier and pressed one massive claw against it. The energy field sparked and flickered but held firm. Then the creature did something that surprised everyone. It stepped back and studied the barrier carefully, like an engineer examining a problem. "It's learning," Han Sol said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't be ridiculous." Veltar's voice drifted from his expanded form. "It's just an animal." But Han Sol could see the intelligence in the beast's eyes as it moved around the enclosure, testing different points on the barrier with increasing precision. This wasn't random animal behavior. The creature was problem-solving. A third power surge rocked the facility, and this time sparks flew from several control panels. The main barrier flickered dangerously, and hairline cracks appeared in the energy field. The Venom beast immediately focused on the weakest points, bringing its full strength to bear on the damaged sections. "Everyone out now!" Dr. Cho shouted, abandoning any pretense of calm. "Emergency evacuation! All personnel to exit immediately!" The alien students panicked completely. Their careful evolutionary programming, which had served them well on peaceful worlds, was useless in the face of real danger. They pushed against each other without coordination, their various forms of locomotion creating chaos in the corridors. In the confusion, Mirsa lost her footing. Her crystalline body was beautiful but fragile, and when she fell, several of her delicate extremities cracked against the floor. She couldn't move quickly at the best of times, and injured, she was helpless. "Help me!" she called out, her voice like breaking crystal. But the other students were too panicked to help. They flowed around her like water around a stone, focused only on their own escape. Even Professor Quindall, trying to maintain order, didn't notice one of his students was down. The Venom beast chose that moment to make its move. With a sound like tearing metal, it drove all 6 limbs into the weakened barrier simultaneously. The energy field held for a moment, then shattered like glass. Alarms began blaring throughout. The facility, no longer polite chimes but urgent warnings that echoed off the walls. Emergency blast doors started to close, designed to contain any breach within Section 7. "The blast doors are sealing," Boram shouted over the noise. "We have 30 seconds to get out." The alien student's panic reached new heights. Veltar, in his terror, expanded even further, now blocking multiple exits completely. The others pushed and struggled against each other, their movements becoming more frantic and less coordinated. And through it all, the Venom beast stepped calmly out of its broken containment, its predatory gaze sweeping across the observation area. It saw the panicking aliens, the closing blast doors, and the injured Mirsa lying helpless on the floor. The creature's head tilted slightly, like a cat deciding which mouse to catch first. Han Sol found himself at a crossroads that every human understood, but no alien could comprehend. Every instinct he possessed screamed at him to run, to escape while he still could. The blast doors were closing, his classmates were fleeing, and staying meant almost certain death. But Mirsa was still on the floor, and the Venom beast was looking directly at her. "Han Sol, come on!" Tae-young called from the exit. "We have to go!" Han Sol looked at his roommate, then at the injured Zeltharian, then at the approaching predator. In that moment, he made the kind of decision that separated humans from every other species in the galaxy. Instead of running away from the danger, he ran toward it. "What are you doing?" Dr. Cho screamed as Han Sol sprinted across the observation area. He didn't answer because he didn't have time to explain something that was fundamentally inexplicable to non-humans. While every other sapient species in the galaxy had evolved beyond the need for physical courage, humans had evolved because of it. The Venom beast saw him coming and turned away from Mirsa. Its acidic saliva began dripping faster, and its claws extended to their full length. This was no longer a sedated specimen or a contained predator. This was 3 meters of pure killing machine, fully awake and very, very angry. Han Sol grabbed a piece of the broken barrier as he ran, its jagged edge still crackling with residual energy. It wasn't much of a weapon against a creature like this, but it was better than nothing. Behind him, he could hear the blast doors slamming shut and his classmates screaming his name. Ahead of him was a monster that could kill him in a dozen different ways. But between him and the monster was Mirsa, and that was all that mattered. The Venom beast opened its jaws, revealing teeth designed to shred armor plating, and charged. Han Sol's transformation was instant and complete. The quiet, careful student who had spent 3 weeks trying not to frighten his classmates vanished, replaced by something that millions of years of evolution had crafted for exactly this moment. He didn't meet the Venom beast's charge head-on. That would have been suicide, and humans had survived by being smarter than the things that wanted to kill them. Instead, he angled his approach, using his momentum and the creature's own speed against it. As the beast lunged with its massive jaws, Hansol dropped into a slide that carried him under the snapping teeth. The jagged barrier fragment in his hand scraped against the creature's armored hide, sending sparks flying but doing little damage. That was fine. He wasn't trying to hurt it yet. "Get behind me!" he shouted to Mirza, not taking his eyes off the predator. The venom beast spun with surprising agility for something so large, its claws gouging deep scratches in the metal floor. It had expected its prey to run or freeze, not attack. This new behavior required assessment. Hansol used that moment of confusion to position himself between the creature and the injured Zeltharian. He held the barrier fragment like a shield, his body coiled and ready to move. Every muscle was tense, every sense focused on the predator before him. From behind the sealed blast doors, he could hear voices. Tae-young was explaining something to the others in rapid Korean, his words barely audible through the thick metal. "He's not trying to kill it," Tae-young was saying. "Look at his stance, his movements. He's defending territory." Professor Quindal's voice, high with panic. "This is madness. No sapient being fights a predator with their bare hands." "Humans do," Dr. Cho replied grimly. "It's what they were made for." But Hansol blocked out the voices, focusing entirely on the creature circling him. The venom beast was testing him, looking for weaknesses, trying to understand this strange new threat. Its eyes, alien but intelligent, studied his every movement. The beast feinted left, then struck right with lightning speed. Hansol was already moving, the barrier fragment deflecting claws that could have torn him in half. He spun with the impact, using the creature's own force to send him rolling away from its follow-up attack. "Easy," Hansol said in a calm, steady voice that somehow carried over the facility's alarms. "Easy there." The venom beast paused, confused by the tone. It had expected fear scent, panic, the usual responses of prey animals. Instead, this small creature was speaking to it like an equal, like another predator establishing dominance. Hansol took advantage of the pause to check on Mirza. The Zeltharian was conscious but unable to move quickly, her crystalline structure damaged from the fall. She watched the confrontation with wide rainbow eyes that reflected every emotion from terror to amazement. "You're talking to it," she whispered in wonder. "Everything responds to voice," Hansol replied, still watching the beast. "Tone matters more than words." The creature decided to test this theory. It charged again, this time with its claws leading. Hansol met the attack with the kind of calculated aggression that his species had perfected over millennia. He didn't just dodge, he redirected. Using the barrier fragment as both shield and lever, he caught the beast's leading claw and twisted, using its own momentum to send it stumbling past him. As it recovered, he was already moving to maintain his position between predator and prey. The watching aliens were silent now, pressed against the blast door's observation windows. They were seeing something that challenged every assumption they held about civilization, intelligence, and the nature of sapient behavior. Veltar had finally managed to compress himself back to normal size, his silvery form trembling. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Sapient beings don't fight. We think our way out of problems." "Maybe that's why you've never faced real problems," Bo-Ram said quietly. The venom beast was learning too. Its attacks became more sophisticated, using feints and combinations that would have overwhelmed most opponents. But Hansol had advantages beyond just reflexes and strength. He had pattern recognition honed by ancestors who had faced saber-toothed cats and cave bears. More importantly, He understood something about predator psychology that the beast's creators had never considered. Apex predators were used to easy victories. They expected their prey to run or submit. Sustained resistance confused them, made them doubt their assessment of the situation. Han Solo wasn't just fighting a monster. He was having a conversation with it, speaking in the ancient language of dominance and territory that every predator understood. When the beast tried to circle around him to reach Mirsa, Han Solo stepped into its path. When it reared up to use its full height advantage, he dropped low and struck at its supporting legs. Every movement was purposeful, controlled, designed to communicate a simple message. You cannot have her. The creature's acidic saliva was eating holes in the metal floor, where it landed, and its claws had left deep gouges in every surface they touched. But Han Solo's improvised shield held, and his positioning never wavered. "Jitar!" Dr. Cho's voice crackled through the facility's communication system. "Can you activate the emergency sedation system?" "Negative," came the buzzing reply. "The creature is moving too much. The sedation gas would affect the human as well." "Then do it anyway." "No," Han Solo called out, somehow hearing the conversation despite the chaos. "Don't sedate me. I can handle this." It was the kind of statement that would have sounded like insane arrogance from any other species. But as the Watchers observed, it became clear that Han Solo wasn't just surviving the encounter. He was controlling it. The Venom beast made one final desperate charge, bringing all its natural weapons to bear simultaneously. Claws, teeth, and crushing weight combined in an assault that should have been impossible to survive. Han Solo met it with a move that was part physics, part instinct, and part pure human stubbornness. He used the creature's own momentum against it, redirecting its charge while simultaneously hooking his improvised weapon behind one of its legs. The result was spectacular. The Venom beast, committed to its attack and unable to change direction, found itself tumbling across the observation area with Han Solo riding its back like some ancient warrior. They crashed into a wall together, but Han Solo had positioned himself to land on top. Before the stunned creature could recover, he had his arm around its neck, applying pressure to specific points that every human seemed to instinctively understand. "Sleep," he said quietly, his voice somehow gentle despite the violence of the moment. "Just sleep." The beast struggled for a moment, then slowly relaxed as Han Solo's grip found the pressure points that could render even an apex predator unconscious. It wasn't killing, wasn't even really violence in the traditional sense. It was dominance, pure and simple. When the creature finally went limp, Han Solo held his position for several seconds longer, making sure it was truly unconscious. Only then did he carefully extract himself and check for injuries. The facility's alarms were still blaring, but the immediate danger had passed. Han Solo looked down at the unconscious predator with something that might have been respect, then turned to check on Mirsa. "Are you hurt?" he asked, kneeling beside the injured Zeltharian. "I don't think so," she replied, her voice filled with wonder. "But how did you do that?" Han Solo helped her to her feet, supporting her damaged form with careful hands. "Practice," he said simply. The blast doors began to open as emergency teams arrived. Dr. Cho was the first through, followed by medical personnel and security officers. They all stopped short when they saw Han Solo calmly helping Mirsa while the Venom beast lay unconscious nearby. "Is it dead?" one of the security officers asked nervously. "No," Han Solo replied. "Just sleeping. You should probably get those sedation systems working before it wakes up." As the emergency teams went to work, the alien students slowly filed back into the observation area. They looked at Han Solo with a mixture of awe, fear, and complete bewilderment. He had done something that challenged everything they thought they knew about civilization, intelligence, and the nature of advanced species. He had met violence with controlled violence, fought a monster with his bare hands, and won. But perhaps most disturbing of all, he had done it to protect someone else. Not for territory, not for resources, not for dominance, but simply because another being was in danger. As Han Solo checked Mirza's injuries and made sure she was stable, his alien classmates began to understand that they had witnessed something unprecedented in their peaceful galaxy. They had seen a human being human. The Academy cafeteria had never been so quiet. Word of the incident had spread through the floating campus like wildfire, and now every alien student seemed to be watching Han Solo as he sat down with his lunch tray. The attention made him uncomfortable, but he tried to act normally as he selected a table near the viewing window. His lunch was simple by human standards: synthesized protein that resembled chicken, some vegetables from the hydroponics bay, and a piece of fruit that actually came from Earth. To the watching aliens, however, it might as well have been a display of exotic barbarism. Mirza approached his table slowly, her crystalline form still showing small cracks from her fall in the facility. The medical team had repaired most of the damage, but she would need several more days to fully heal. Despite her injuries, she seemed determined to sit with him. "May I join you?" she asked, her musical voice carrying clearly in the quiet cafeteria. "Of course," Han Solo replied, gesturing to the chair across from him. As Mirza carefully settled herself, more students began to gather nearby. Not close enough to intrude, but near enough to observe. Professor Quindal sat at a faculty table, watching the interaction with obvious concern. "I wanted to thank you again," Mirza said, her rainbow eyes reflecting the light from the viewing window. "What you did was extraordinary." Han Solo took a bite of his protein, chewing thoughtfully, before responding. "It wasn't that extraordinary, just necessary." "But you could have died." Veltar's voice drifted over from a nearby table. The Netherian had been unusually subdued since the incident, his usual arrogance replaced by confused uncertainty. "Yeah," Han Solo agreed. "But you would have died if I hadn't acted. All of us would have." The simple logic of it seemed to baffle his listeners. Tae Young arrived with his own lunch tray, sitting down beside Han Solo with practiced ease. The other human students at the academy had learned to ignore the staring, but Han Solo was still adjusting. "How are you feeling?" Tae Young asked in Korean. "Tired," Han Solo replied honestly. "And hungry. Fighting makes you hungry." "Fighting." Mirza repeated the word like she was testing a foreign concept. "Is that what you call what happened?" "More like wrestling," Han Solo corrected. "I wasn't trying to hurt the beast, just control it until help arrived." Boram joined them from the service line, her work uniform replaced by casual student clothes. "The facility staff is calling you a hero," she said with a grin. "Dr. Cho says she's never seen anything like it." "It's not heroic to do what needs doing," Han Solo said, finishing his protein and moving on to the vegetables. "Anyone would have done the same thing." The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Professor Quindal approached their table, his four arms moving nervously as he tried to find the right words. "Mr. Kim," he said formally, "I owe you an apology. My comments yesterday about civilized species and violence were uninformed. Han Sol looked up from his meal. You weren't wrong, Professor. Violence isn't civilized, but sometimes uncivilized. Action is necessary to protect civilization. The philosophy professor's expression showed he was struggling with this concept. But how do you reconcile aggressive behavior with moral development? How can violence serve a greater good? Violence doesn't serve good, Tae-young interjected. The capacity for violence serves good. There's a difference. Mirza tilted her crystalline head. I don't understand the distinction. Think of it like this, Han Sol said, setting down his fork. A surgeon carries scalpels. The scalpel is a weapon designed to cut and wound, but in the surgeon's hands, it becomes a tool for healing, the capacity to harm controlled by the will to heal. But the Venom beast, Veltar said, drifting closer despite himself. You didn't heal it. You fought it. I controlled it, Han Sol corrected. There's a difference between fighting to destroy and fighting to protect. I wasn't trying to hurt the beast. I was trying to stop it from hurting others. Dr. Cho appeared at their table, looking tired but relieved. The Venom beast is secure and unharmed, she reported. Thanks to you, Mr. Kim. I've been doing incident analysis for 20 years and I've never seen anything like your response. What happens now? Bo-Ram asked. The facility is reviewing all safety protocols, Dr. Cho replied. We've learned that our systems were designed with certain assumptions about specimen behavior that proved incorrect. We're also implementing new emergency procedures based on human response patterns. Han Sol raised an eyebrow. Human response patterns? Your actions revealed gaps in our understanding, Professor Quindall admitted. Our emergency procedures assume rational, orderly evacuation. We never considered that some beings might move toward danger rather than away from it. It's not irrational, Mirza said quietly. It's just a different kind of rational. Han Sol calculated that my life was worth the risk to his own. That's not mindless aggression. That's mathematical compassion. The phrase hung in the air as the aliens considered it. Mathematical compassion, a formula that balanced personal risk against others' welfare and came up with answers that seemed impossible to non-human minds. Is this common among humans? Professor Quindall asked. This willingness to face personal danger for others? Tae-young and Bo-Ram exchanged glances. Pretty common, Tae-young said. We call it different things. Heroism, duty, doing the right thing. But yeah, it's normal human behavior. At our university on Earth, Bo-Ram added, we had emergency drills every semester. Students would practice carrying injured classmates to safety, forming human shields around the vulnerable, fighting off attackers. It's just part of education. The alien students absorbed this information with visible shock. The idea that an entire species would systematically train its young to risk themselves for others was beyond their evolutionary experience. But why? Veltar asked, his silvery form pulsing with confusion. What advantage does self-sacrifice provide to the individual? None, Han Sol said simply, but it provides advantage to the group. Humans who protected their communities survived. To pass on their genes. Humans who only protected themselves often died alone. So your aggression serves your social bonds, Mirza said with growing understanding. You're not violent despite being civilized. You're civilized because you can be violent. Something like that, Han Sol agreed. As lunch continued, more students gathered around their table. The initial fear and shock were giving way to curiosity. They wanted to understand how beings could be both dangerous and trustworthy, aggressive and protective. "Can you teach us?" a small furry alien asked shyly. "The way you moved? The way you controlled the situation?" Hansol considered the question seriously. "I can teach you the basics, but the real skill isn't in the fighting. It's in knowing when to fight and when not to, when violence serves peace and when it destroys it." "I would like to learn," Mirza said firmly. "Not the fighting, but the thinking, the mathematics of compassion." Over the following hours, word spread throughout the academy. By evening, Hansol found himself surrounded by alien students eager to understand human psychology, human ethics, and human methods of problem-solving. He started with simple concepts: how to assess threats realistically without falling into panic or denial, how to make quick decisions under pressure, how to balance personal safety against group welfare. Most importantly, he taught them the difference between aggression and violence, between strength and cruelty, between being capable of harm and being willing to cause it. "The strongest beings," he explained to his growing audience, "are those who never need to prove their strength. The most dangerous are those who use their danger only to protect the innocent." As the artificial night settled over the academy, Hansol found himself at the center of something unprecedented. For the first time in galactic history, a violent species was teaching peaceful ones not how to fight, but how to think about fighting. More importantly, they were learning that humanity's reputation as dangerous was exactly what made them safe to be around. A human would fight a monster to protect a stranger, face impossible odds to defend the helpless, and risk everything to preserve what they considered right. In a galaxy full of advanced, peaceful species, they had discovered something they never knew they needed: guardians who were willing to be dangerous so others could remain safe. When Mirza finally left for her dormitory, her parting words summed up the day's revelation. "I understand now why the galaxy feels safer with humans in it. You're not dangerous to us. You're dangerous for us." As Hansol watched her crystalline form disappear into the distance, he reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. He'd come to this academy to learn about alien life. Instead, he'd ended up teaching aliens about humanity. Tomorrow, he decided he'd start that self-defense class several students had requested, not to make them violent, but to help them understand the mathematics of compassion that had driven human evolution for millions of years. After all, the galaxy was a big place, full of dangers that peaceful species had never imagined. And someone needed to stand between the light and the dark, between the civilized and the savage. Humans, it turned out, were very good at standing in dangerous places.